Welcome into the Valley. I am Ethan Shutt, joined as always by Philip Russell and my brother Ryan, and we are coming at you at a little bit different time than usual due to unfortunate death in the family on Philip's side of things. There's going to be some travel in the upcoming days, and so typically we record Monday night, post Tuesday morning. For this episode, we're recording Sunday night, so if you are tuned in Tuesday morning expecting us to talk about the Suns, I guess we can just choose either option. Exciting win or disappointing loss, or wow, how did they pull that one out there? We have no idea. So that'll be something we'll cover next week. But until then, hopefully you can be patient with us. And obviously we'll try to work to get back to our regular schedule. But we do have a lot to talk about. And real quick, just wanted to go ahead and say thank you to Manscaped for sponsoring this episode of Into the Valley. And along with that, I want to say thank you to those that are listening. Our audio platform numbers have been doing better week after week, which is wonderful. Even some folks going back and listening to some old stuff, which that makes me happy. And our YouTube channel is continuing to grow. So feel free to like, subscribe, leave a review. Last time I said comment something down in the YouTube comments, just say something silly. And one of you actually just said something silly. So whatever your heart moves you to do, feel free to hop in the comments.
I'll make mention that the same individual who wrote something silly actually took me up on my handwritten thank you card and DM'd me on Twitter. However, they said they just wanted to show love and don't want a card. But I will say, I think we hit 56 subscribers on YouTube this week. I will leave my offer open until we hit 100.
Yes.
So if you
make them
subscribe,
broke, make them broke, baby.
If you subscribe to our YouTube channel and send us a screenshot on Twitter of you subscribing, I would be more than happy just to show our appreciation to you to send you a handwritten thank you card just for being a part of the Into the Valley family and showing us some love. And you guys have shown some mad love so far, so it's very appreciated.
So homie who wanted you to write the letter was the same person who made the comment about
something
Devin
silly.
Booker being better than Luka Doncic.
No,
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
Different person.
I will say if you guys are listening
That is a spicy
and want to read some interesting takes, feel free to check out last week's video. Not our emergency pod, but the one before it. Things got heated in the Luka versus Ayton versus Booker.
Yeah.
And then some I think Mavs fans said they liked Jalen Brunson better than Luka. I mean, it was a take factory up in here. It was like watching ESPN at 9 a.m. You have no idea what you're going to read or hear, but it's going to be there.
My Twitter bio for a long time was a campaign stan account. It is currently, I'm the Frank Kaminsky of Suns Twitter. If Jalen Brunson ever drops a 45 piece in a game, I will change my bio for 6 months to a Jalen Brunson stan account.
And just to tell everybody like the spice level in the power rankings of Luka Doncic, Devin Booker, and Jalen Brunson, it's unclear whether or not this person has Jalen Brunson first, but they definitely have Luka Doncic third. So
I love it.
Linger on the spice.
I love it. So anyway, yes, we appreciate all the love and all the engagement on our content recently. Also want to give a shout out to those who were able to pick up some of the hot drops in Phoenix. Was it last shot, final shot, Booker's buzzer beater over the Clippers in a beautiful shirt form. Now, if you're dropping $90 on a shirt, $180 on a hoodie, good on you. I would like to show those watching on YouTube that I have this butte for $4 on eBay. So it looks like we're all coming up on top recently. But guys, we've never done an emergency podcast before. Ryan, I love you, and I'm sorry that you couldn't have joined us due to some technical issues on that one. But
hey man, I'm just happy I got to watch the game. I will take watching that game over being on the emergency pod every time. That was highlight of my week last week, to be honest.
That starts our recap here of what you may have missed since our last episode. If you're somehow out there and only using our podcast to keep you updated on Suns news, which if that's the case, I'm sorry, we try our best. But the big thing to start the week was Wednesday night's game over the Jazz. Suns win 117-113 in overtime. We'll touch on that some more in a second. Follow that up the very next night, which, man, that just we've talked about this schedule for a long time now. When they released the second half, just brutal. Playing the Clippers Thursday night, losing 113 to 103, could have been worse. That's the nice way for me to kind of just share my general feelings towards it. I never was, we all talk about this. We weren't taking too much stock in that game, no matter what happened. But 113-103. And then Saturday night against the Wizards, Suns win 134 to 106. So I'm going to open the floor to you guys in terms of observations, thoughts, highlights, whatever you want about this week in the rear view. But I do want to say this week kind of cracked me up. And we're going to touch on it in a second. I felt like this week was the Suns' entire season in a nutshell. The only thing missing was losing to a bad team. And so we have the Utah game where it's, wow, the Suns can absolutely hang with the best of the best. They're a contender. They win big games. They close it out in the overtime, all that great stuff. It also showed us you can hang with anyone. You can hang with any contender, but not every night is your night, whether that's awful shooting, which we witnessed some of that. The other team's just super hot, whatever have you. We see that. And then the Wizards game, which I don't know, that's probably the most common of this entire season, which is play a bad team. And I know we said the Wizards are good, not great, but they're not on the echelon of the Jazz or Clippers, and hang with them and make it close for far too long before getting some separation. And so, again, other than losing a game to, I don't know, the Pistons or something, like I feel like this week was kind of in a nutshell the entire season. Guys, what stood out to you about this week? And I know that there's a lot to talk about with the Jazz game and Clippers games, but Philip, I'll start with you. Kind of what's that one thing from this week for you?
The one thing, unfortunately, would be a negative. The Suns team defense has been really, really good this entire season. They are a good defensive team. Something that I'm cluing in on more as the playoffs approach is one-on-one defense, and specifically on-ball defense. And against good teams, whether it was against Mitchell and Ingles in the Jazz game, or against obviously Kawhi and Paul George in the Clippers game, I haven't been super impressed with the Suns on-ball defense, and we're gonna touch on this a little bit later in the episode. But that's something that I'm really interested in to watch as the season moves forward. Maybe it's regular season hiccups, but I would like to see, for the Suns' sake, I would like to see the on-ball defense take a step up.
Ryan, what stood out to you this week, man?
I'm going to give credit where credit's due, and that's going to be to the big man himself, DeAndre Ayton. I think we have seen a string of consistency out of him that we haven't seen maybe as long as we've seen it in the past probably 6 games, as we have all season. Is he putting up super flashy numbers? No. But he's been playing really consistently, and I've enjoyed seeing that, because I think so far our biggest criticism isn't that he's not capable, it's how inconsistent he is in stringing those games together. I'm not asking for 23 and 15 every night. I'm not asking him to be Andre Drummond and drop a 20-20 piece every now and then, or Enes Kanter dropping 24 and 30. But the fact that we're seeing a pretty consistent 15 and 10, 14 and 13, I love that. And if we can just keep that consistency going, we're going to be fine. But on the flip side of that coin, the highlight of DeAndre playing well is the fact that there's still not quite an answer to who's behind him. And that is still just kind of scary to me. But I want to credit the big man, because I know sometimes I can be a little harsh on him and what my expectations are. But I've been really pleased for about the last 7 games with his production, and I hope he keeps it going.
Yeah, I think I'm hoping that consistency is something we'll continue to see in the next few weeks. The thing that jumped out to me the most, other than just it's good to see a team win against other good teams, let alone, again, national TV, overtime game. You get a 3-pointer hit on you to send it to overtime. How are you going to come out for those last 5 minutes, those overtime minutes? And man, quick 2 points, another 3, you get that lead, you get the momentum. And that just jumps out to me as a team that doesn't get defeated easily. And that goes back to my highlight of the whole season, which goes back, goodness, like week 2 or 3, When they played the Clippers, they got down by like 30 something in the second quarter, clawed it back to a possession game with a minute left. From the very beginning of the season till now, this team has just showed an incredible amount of heart. And I saw that on display again, where it's, wow, this is such a Suns thing. Booker misses the floater that basically goes in and then rolls out. Mitchell comes and hits a stupid off-balance three that magically hits front rim and goes in. Watching them pull it together in overtime was amazing. But the one person that stood out to me, and we talked about this a lot on the emergency pod, was Cam Johnson. And it wasn't just that he had a really good performance against Utah, which he did. I mean, statistically, he did everything you'd want, defensively, offensively, everything. But he was one of those players for me that I hadn't quite bought in fully when it came to the playoffs. There's a lot of pieces for me, whether it's because of intangibles or skill sets, where it's like, yeah, in the playoffs, you're a lock. Jay Crowder, Torrey Craig. Those are two dudes that are just playoff minutes locks, because offensively, they can do what you need in your system. Defensively, obviously, they bring a lot to the table. Mikal obviously fits that mold as well. And Cam is an interesting one for me because Cam Johnson offensively opens up so much. Like he is the best shooter on the team. And having him out there does a lot for a quick, pass heavy, throw the ball around, high assists every game offense like Monty has put in. But my concern has always been whether it's a matchup disadvantage of a smaller, quicker 2 or 3 that he's guarding, or having to bang down low with a 4 or a 5. What is Cam going to do in big minutes in a big game? And we saw that for the first time, not really of his own doing, but because of Mikal Bridges getting into foul trouble. I think Bridges finished 0 of 1 with 0 points and 5 fouls, something crazy like that. But because of that, Cam Johnson had way more minutes and a whole lot more pressure than he's used to seeing. Monty had a very interesting quote in the postgame where he actually wanted to put Mikal back in at the tail end of the fourth and in overtime, and he got vetoed by his assistant coaches, who told Monty basically, Cam's cooking, leave him. And one side note, I love that Monty listened and was willing to openly put himself out there like that. I think that just speaks volume to him as a leader and a listener. But Cam was incredible. And Philip, you talked about it some too. I mean, defensively, have you ever seen him play quite that well, at least in your recollection this season?
No, and what those wings have to do really well a lot of times is work alongside DA, because a lot of times the wings are going to funnel the guards or the wings, whoever they might be guarding, in a certain direction, and then they're trying to get DA on their back hip to close off passing lanes and to wall up the drive. Cam did that very well against the Jazz on several possessions. And obviously it's the NBA, so he's going to get beaten sometimes. But there were a lot of possessions where I was watching, and even live, it was just like, yes, that is exactly what you need to be doing in that situation. It's something that Mikal and DA do pretty well consistently throughout. So when you see him, that's not necessarily him being an insane individual defender. That's him being really good within the team concept and staying connected to the principles that they're trying to play. And that is a very encouraging sign going into the playoffs.
And I also love just how engaged he is offensively with a guy who shoots as well as he does. So much of what he does is off the ball and goes unnoticed. Mike Vigil did a great job of pointing it out even through the Wizards game where Cam Johnson was freeing up the offense by setting a lot of these ghost screens where it looks like he's about to screen the defender, which causes a premature shift. And all of a sudden our offensive look changes, and it's because Cam is such a threat for that pick and pop style shot or getting set up in the corner that people are like, oh, this dude's a weapon. We have to be mindful of what he can do. And man, if we get Cam at his, not even his ceiling, but if we get him playing at a level where he's producing nightly, that's just going to allow Book and even Chris Paul just to breathe a little bit more offensively. And it's going to be fun.
And offensively, we've seen him be able to create more this season than we ever even imagined we would see this year after just even his impressive run in the bubble. But everything for him is so predicated on his 3-point shot. If that's not going, you're in trouble and you now have a liability. He was 7 of 13 this week from behind the line, or from behind the 3-point line, excuse me. And again, those were in bigger minutes than he's used to seeing, especially the Jazz game. I think Clippers Wizards use it around the 20 to 25 minute mark, a little bit more than norm. But again, you're hitting those shots, you become incredibly valuable to the offense. So anyway, anything else about this past week before we take a quick second to knock out our ad read for the week and then move on kind of to our ending discussion? No?
Wait,
All right.
our ad read, Ethan, could you tell me about it?
Ooh, I love when I intro an ad read so that you could intro my ad read. I think that makes us look very smooth. But yes, Ryan, I do have something I want to share. And we mentioned it already. This episode is brought to you by Manscaped, the best in men's below the waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision engineered tools for your family jewels. They obsess over their technology and products to provide you the best tools for your grooming experience. They're trusted by over 2 million men plus us 3 worldwide. And we have an exclusive offer for our listeners, 20% off plus free shipping using the code VALLEY, VALLEY at manscaped.com. While we suggest that you can try out any of their great products, we personally can recommend the Perfect Package 3.0 containing the Lawnmower 3.0, the Crop Preserver, the Crop Reviver, and with that Perfect Package 3.0, they're throwing in 2 free gifts, a pair of high-performance Manscaped boxer briefs that'll keep your boys feeling fresh all day long, and a travel shed bag to store all your grooming goodies. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code VALLEY at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com using code VALLEY. Unlock your confidence and always use the right tools for the job with Manscaped. Gentlemen, we have been wonderfully blessed by the folks at Manscaped. Ad read aside, I think we can all give them a whole lot of love, recommend it to anyone who's interested. But we now come to our ending discussion, and our ending discussion was beautifully curated by Philip for this fine episode. So Philip, give the folks at home a little intro to what we are talking about to end our episode today.
So the Suns are in a position, and I'm sure the 2 big Suns fans on the pod are going to beam when I say this, where they get to look towards the playoffs. And part of what that means is the regular season can be, and we've mentioned this, the regular season is going to get a little boring the last 20 games or so, unless you're really clued into playoff matchups and possible matchups. So that's what we wanted to do. What we wanted to do is we wanted to look at 2 different groups of teams and think about who would the Suns most like to play. So we're going to break these down into the top 6 teams in the West, and then the 7th through 10th seeds in the West. The reason we're doing that is 7 through 10 will obviously be in the play-in game, and then 1 through 6 would be a potential second or even third round matchup. So we're going to kind of talk through some of these different teams and then think about which of those presents the most favorable matchup to the Suns.
Yeah, because we don't want it to just be like, hey, what's your dream playoff matchup? What you would like to play, I don't know, Dallas or New Orleans, whatever. Like that's great, but we don't want it to be completely reliant on the Suns being the 1 seed or 2 seed. There's still a lot of movement happening. And although we're in a wonderful spot as Suns fans to hear the TNT announcers say, now when the Suns get to the playoffs, like it's been 10 years, I will take that and be happy. But we kind of just see 2 groups forming, like Philip said. And so the first group we're going to look at is the potential first round matchups. I'm going to share these with you as well as telling you the current in-season record the Suns have with these teams. So the first one is Dallas. This season, the Suns have a 3-0 lead in that series, which is wonderful. There's a lot of, I'm not going to go too far into this, but ever since the Ayton Luka draft, it is quite funny. I think the Suns are now like 9-1 against the Mavs. So it's not just this season. It seems like that matchup has always been a good one. We got the Memphis Grizzlies. The Suns are 2-1 against the Grizzlies this year. The San Antonio Spurs, which super weird. They haven't played yet. The Spurs are on the schedule 3 more times, or I guess 3 times to end this season, one of which has an actual time slot in a day. The other 2 are TBD on certain days. Guessing that's going to have to do with TV schedules, kind of how that all shakes up when it comes to playoff implications. That's typically what we see. And then the last 2, we've got the New Orleans Pelicans. We are 2-1 against the Pelicans this year. And then the Golden State Warriors, who the Suns are currently 2-0 against this season. So looking at these matchups, the first thing you can say from a very surface view statistically is the Suns have a winning record against all of them. That's great. What you come to find out is that the Suns have a winning record against a lot of teams because the Suns have a great record against the powerhouses. They have a great record against the bottom tier. And lucky for them, a lot of the losses against bad teams have come out in the East. Don't know why, haven't quite figured out what that could mean. But when you guys look at these teams in the potential first round, I guess we'll start with this one. If you could pick your option A, your dream scenario first round, who would that be? And Philip, I'll start it off with you.
I think looking at that, there are two teams that I just wouldn't be worried about for the Suns at all, and that would be the Grizzlies or the Spurs. If I had to pick one of those for the Suns to play, it would probably be the Grizzlies for a couple reasons. Number one, I think pretty much everybody would say that the Suns will have the best player on the court, maybe even the two best players, depending on where you rank CP3 in relation to Ja Morant. And then the reality, and this might be putting too much stock into the bubble last season, the Grizzlies were not good in the bubble. And that was their last meaningful basketball that they had been playing. So, and then one of the reasons why they struggled in the bubble and they're not much of a threat is because they're not a particularly great shooting team. Their 3-point percentage is middle of the road, offensive efficiency, middle of the road. The most dangerous thing that the Grizzlies offer is that they can play fast. They're sixth in pace and they have a solid defensive net rating. So they're a young athletic team, but when it comes to their offensive potency, it's just not there.
I think Chris Vernon was talking about this either on one of the Ringer shows or just on Twitter. I think their best lineup revolves around a mix of Morant, Brooks, and oh, goodness gracious, played on the Suns, D'Anthony Melton. 3 basically point guard, shooting guard combos just flying up and down the court. I think that's been their best net rated 1 through 3. And so that is definitely their style. I definitely see where you're coming from with that one. Ryan, what would you kind of go with your maybe 1 or 2 dream scenarios there?
So San Antonio, if I had to list, San Antonio is my number one. Now, I do want to put a bit of a caveat, just not having seen the matchup this season. It's hard to say definitely that's who I would want. But just looking up and down the roster, I think we're a much deeper team than San Antonio is. I don't think you can ever fully count out Coach Pop because I think the dude is an X's and O's genius. But when your team focus for most of this season has been Keldon Johnson, I'm not too worried. I mean, the kid's good, but
Okay.
if he's your big threat, at the end of the day, I'm not super worried about San Antonio. I'm a little higher on the Grizzlies than Philip is. I actually had them as one of my teams that I wouldn't want just because I feel like Ja is destined to have his kind of opening to the playoffs at some point. I don't want to be the team that happens to. And so that kind of worries me. It's also interesting. Jaren Jackson Jr. has no timetable for his return from injury yet. He's on the IR or the injury report. So I don't know what that'll look like. I had San Antonio and actually New Orleans as the two that I would prefer. New Orleans has proved to be kind of a tough matchup for us. But I've seen enough to be pretty confident that we would match up just fine with them. But San Antonio for sure would be the one that right now I'm not sweating at all.
Yeah. So kind of similar there. And it looks like all of us have San Antonio as one of the two. So the Spurs, again, haven't seen the matchup, but they seem to have progressively gotten worse in terms of, and I know LaMarcus Aldridge leaving with the weird buyout and everything makes him seem like an invaluable piece. To the Spurs, he still was a part of their offense, whether it was huge or not. So they're still kind of figuring out what life looks like now. This might be incredibly ballsy of me. And if so, you can tell me. And if this blows up in my face, we can look back at this and be sad. I would love to see the Suns play the Mavericks. And here is why. I know. Trust me. It's a weird thought to think out loud too. The reason I say that is in terms of the matchup, and it goes back to something you said, Philip, about the best players on the team. I think if you put the rosters of the Suns and Mavericks together in one list, the Suns would probably have 7, I would say, like 7 of the top 10 players. You know what I mean? And the reason I think that we can handle that, other than the fact of a good track record of the last 3 years, good track record this season, it goes back to last year's playoffs for me. And when you're looking at last year's playoffs, the 7 seed Mavericks took the Clippers to 6 games, and that was a huge deal. And if you remember, I think Porzingis was kind of hot too to start that, got hurt and was out. Luka was the leading scorer in that series, 3 of these 6 games, dropping 42, 43, and 38. And they did not win that series, right?
Well, that's because Jalen Brunson didn't perform, right?
Listen, I'm just saying, and this isn't against the NBA Finals Clippers or NBA champ Clippers. This was a Clippers team that ended up kind of petering out of the playoffs, weren't performing on all cylinders. Paul George was a mess. Even when Luka was absolutely on fire, and at times having a number 2 to back him up, they didn't have the depth to handle a playoff series. And if you look at their team now, I think they even have less depth. They also have something that I think is incredibly important, and that's a good matchup for DeAndre Ayton. I think DeAndre Ayton against the Mavericks, he can stay on the court at all times, which is incredibly important. And there's some weird who knows what, with the rest of these teams. The only one that I'd be terrified about is the Warriors. And I know they're not good, but I never, ever, ever want to play against Steph Curry in any game that's kind of important.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I would be very careful wishing the Mavericks against the Suns, just as someone outside of the fandom and just someone who gets to enjoy the good basketball that the Suns play. You should always be nervous going into a playoff series if you can definitively say the other team has the best player on the court or they have a generational superstar. And you can obviously say that with the Warriors. Steph's one of top 5 in the league. I think I'm very comfortable saying he's top 5 in the league. The question there, though, is where do you put Luka? And after that performance against the Clippers and with the Mavericks kind of gaining some momentum right now and they're going to wind up having a significantly better second half of the season than they did first half. Can they ride that momentum? Can they get a guy like JJ Redick involved? Can they get Dorian Finney-Smith going even more in the playoffs? So that's why I'd be a little nervous to say, yeah, bring on the Mavericks.
I just look at the roster, and Luka obviously terrifies the crap out of me. Porzingis is probably going to be hurt. Sorry, man. That's kind of the thing these days. And then you're relying on Tim Hardaway Jr., Jalen Brunson, Josh Richardson, Finney-Smith, Maxi Kleber, insert other guys who you've forgotten existed. That's one for me when you know the strength of the team is big, long wings. I don't know. Like, I think that matchup is good. Like, just top to top. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy. I could be crazy. That's okay. That happens sometimes. But anyway, I think the consensus would be outside of Steph Curry terrifying all of us and Luka probably dropping 40 every night. The first round, none of those matchups are terrifying. The only area it gets real sketchy is if the Suns drop to like 4 and have to play a 5, because the 5 seed is going to more than likely be in the group that we for now deemed second rounders. And so the second round plus, who knows what that is, potential matchups here we have are the Utah Jazz, who, crazy enough, the Suns are 2-0 against this season. The LA Clippers, which on the opposite end, they are 0-2 against. The LA Lakers, they're 2-0 with an asterisk of like, haven't really gone up.
Played.
Yeah, weird stuff. The Denver Nuggets, which I also put an asterisk on, the Suns are 1-2, but both losses were back-to-back nights, back-to-back overtime games, and it was in the early season where the Suns hadn't quite figured it out yet. So I'm not saying 1-2 is not fair, not saying if they played 3 more it wouldn't go that way, but definitely they were hanging in with every one of those games. And then finally the Trailblazers, who are the Suns are 2-0 against. So looking at these teams, I personally think there's an obvious 1 and 2 that I would be okay playing against, and that would be the Trailblazers and the Nuggets.
Those are not my two.
Those are not my
Here
two.
is why. The Jazz still terrify me. I do not care that the Suns won 2. The Jazz terrify me. And the reason is the things that make the Jazz good are the same things that make the Suns good, which is so many shooters, so much movement, so much depth, and a dude that can take over. And on their end, that I don't think we quite have, a defensive anchor who definitely shows up every night. Now, the Clippers are absolutely not a chance in the world I want to go up against the Clippers. The Lakers are an absolutely not. The Nuggets, for me, are starting to scare me, but they don't scare me as much as the Jazz do currently. And the Trailblazers, absolutely, they can get hot. They can have 2 dudes dropping 40 a night. I don't care. I don't think they're good enough roster-wise, depth-wise, to hold up.
They can't get stops, period. They're 29th in defensive rating.
So I think we can – let's just go ahead and say this. We all agree that the Trailblazers are the dream. But yep. I'm curious to hear – I'm guessing you guys would rather play the Jazz and the Nuggets, both of you?
I have a wild one here.
Oh, no. If you say something with LeBron James, then I'm going to kill you.
It's not. We don't have much time left, so I won't go too deep into it. But my team's actually the Clippers, and I'll give you the 2 reasons why. I'll give you my 2 reasons why. Our 2 losses to them are the one this week after an overtime game. I'm calling that one a bit of a hangover. I think we could play with them.
Scary.
And our first loss early in the season came off of, again, a back-to-back of the Jazz and the Nuggets. We were down 31, only lost by 5, and it was only a day's rest after 2 back-to-back against 2 very hard teams. Plus, Paul George does have a tendency, I won't say it's a pattern, but
playoff P, baby,
to disappear in the playoffs. I am not as terrified of the Clippers as maybe others are for that reason.
I'm more scared of the Jazz than the Clippers. Because the Clippers have 2 guys that terrify me. After that, no.
The Jazz and the Lakers are who I do not want in the second round.
All right, Philip, go for it. Close us out here with your takes.
The talent at wing for the Clippers is too much for the Suns to handle. I think that's why they would stay off the Clippers if possible, because that game the other night, it was hard offensively for both teams. And you saw a lot of really tough shots made by Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. I think they combined for well over 50 as a duo. So that talent wing, that's just tough. That's a lot to handle in a playoff game. Now, in the playoffs, would you expect the Suns to get outshot from the 3-point line by 36 like they did the other night? Definitely not. That was a bit of an aberration, but I think the Clippers a wing, avoid them at all costs. The thing with the Jazz is you're nervous about a couple things. One, if they play a pretty brand of basketball and are shooting just normally, they're going to score at a good clip. And Mitchell has the ability to go bonkers. Yeah. Counter to that sounds exactly like the Suns, which is why I would say the Jazz, that could be a 7-game series, but you don't walk in to the Jazz series necessarily afraid of any of their players. Maybe Gobert, but DA's a good matchup with Gobert if he's playing well. Now, where I would disagree with you, Ethan, is with the Nuggets.
They can be so scary, but they can also look a dumpster fire.
Yes. Yeah. And their bench depth is a problem that they're going to have, but they have, not to slander Chris Paul or Devin Booker, they have clearly, easily, and by some order of magnitude, the best player on the court who's averaging
the stupidest numbers ever.
26, 13, and 8 this year against the Suns. 26, 13, and 8.
Have you seen his shooting numbers too?
Shooting.
He's shooting, I think 50, 40, 80. Like, that's so stupid. Sorry. That just annoys me how good he is looking like a bus driver, a tall bus driver, but a bus driver. Sorry.
It's unreal. Bad. So here's what I think it comes down to. And one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation, the Suns are a really good team, but it's going to be a rare playoff series, second round and on, where they can definitively say they have the best player or 2 players on the court, which is why I would say Face the Jazz, that's all right. Face the Blazers, that's all right as well.
No, I like it. And I think the one thing though that is nice is knowing that if there's other team podcasts out there, I don't think anyone wants to play the Suns. And that's a good feeling, because I think the way, if they're being objective good basketball fan, like the way the Jazz can scare you is the same way the Suns can scare you. And that means you're built for anything. I don't think there's one matchup that you look at and you say the Suns are toast.
Built different.
Yeah, we'll see. But no, guys, Philip, love the idea. I think that was a great way to end it out. And we'll keep an eye on this. I want to try to see if we can keep these records updated as the season progresses. Obviously, not a whole lot left to it. But guys, thank you for doing this. If you're listening again, we appreciate your kindness and giving us a little hesitancy with the release. Hopefully the Rockets game goes okay and you're listening to this on a good note, looking at a win going into the rest of the week. The rest of the week's kind of nuts between today and our next episode. We got the Rockets, like I said, Heat, Kings, Spurs, and then the Bucks might have Giannis, might not. So who knows? But this has been another episode of Into the Valley. Thank you to Manscaped. Thank you to all those that are listening. I'm Ethan, joined by Ryan and Philip.
We out.